Okay, we're going to make a clamp with the scrap piece of the rosewood is what I'm using, and this will allow us to clamp straight to the soundboard. Now make sure that it's longer than the actual bridge that you're making, and that it's fairly thick. You don't want anything so flimsy that it bends under the pressure. Now we're going to need a little hardware with this. These are some T-nuts and some screws that fit them. You're going to need 2 of those. Some of them will have a little tooth that goes into the wood. Some, like these, can just nail in. But you want a screw that's a little smaller than the bridge pins that you're going to use. The ones I'm using, as you can see here, are 632, and I'm using about a 2-inch long screw. And you're going to need some washers and some nuts that fit the screws. Now I'm going to use a drill bit here that's about the same size as the smallest diameter of the bridge pin. You know, these taper, so just make sure that you're not getting too large there. And that screw also needs to be smaller than that as well. And now I'm going to drill some holes here on the high and low string. You can see the holes in here, and we're going to use these as our alignment holes, and then this is where the clamp will attach as well. So I'm going to line this up on our block, and I'll take just a little C-clamp and clamp this in place so it doesn't move on me. And then I'll go ahead and drill those 2 holes all the way through our clamp as well. And then you can see we've got the holes here. And then on the clamp, we're going to need to put pressure on these outer ends. So I'm going to drill some holes for the T-nuts so that we can have a screw that goes through and puts pressure on the outer edges. Make sure your drill bit's large enough that that will slide into the wood, into the hole that we're drilling. And now you can see I've got the 2 holes here for the wing nuts, or the T-nuts I should say. And you can see the screw will go through here, and then we can use that to put pressure down on those outer ends of the bridge. And now you can fasten those to the wood, it's not really necessary. And now we're going to make sure that we have the bridge where we want it, that it lines up with the center line, and that our saddle location is going to be where the scale length determines. And I'm just going to double check my scale length here and make sure that the bridge is exactly where it needs to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and drill those same 2 holes through the top of the guitar. And now I'm going to take one of the screws with a washer and go in through the sound hole here, and just be careful, can be tight to get that in there. And then I'm going to screw one of the nuts on here just to hold the bridge in place. Then I'm going to realign it before I drill that second hole, just to make sure that it stays exactly where it needs to be. Doesn't hurt to recheck that scale length and measure it a 3rd time just to make sure. Okay. Now I'm just going to hold these in here with the screws. Okay, now I'm going to take an X-Acto knife and I'm going to trace out the outer outline here, and I'm just scoring this very lightly through the tape just to where I can cut the tape out and not really cutting into the soundboard. Might make a light scratch mark on top of the soundboard, but I'm not really cutting into the wood here. Just make sure you're all the way through the tape. May have to go around it a couple of times real lightly. But once you've got it outlined, then we're going to remove those screws. And we can go ahead and take the bridge off. Okay, you can see the line that we've outlined here. Now just carefully remove the tape from underneath the bridge, leaving the remaining tape on. And what we're going to do here is scrape off the finish from underneath the bridge. And I'm going to do that with a razor blade. To start with, I'm going to just lightly start scraping around the outer edges. And the razor blade here will give you a little more control, especially around the very outer edges, than say sandpaper would. And just work your way around the outer edge, and then when you get to this sort of the center part, you can switch over to sandpaper and just start sanding off the finish there. And then once I'm down to the bare wood here, I'm going to go back in and just touch up those outer edges, make sure they're nice and smooth, and we got bare wood completely under the bridge. Okay, once that's done and we're all bare wood there, we can take off the remaining tape. Okay. Now touch up any little marks that you need to do after you've taken the tape off, and then I'm going to just put the bridge back on and make sure everything's aligned and there's no bare wood showing when the bridge is on. Now when we start to glue up, make sure you've got a little handful of cotton swabs and some little scrap pieces of wood. We've got our clamp ready, and I'm going to glue this on with wood glue. If you have hide glue available and you're good at using it, that would be an excellent choice here as well. Okay, now I'm going to get the clamp set up before we start. I'm just going to go ahead and get some screws started into the T-nuts there, one on each end. And have a pair of pliers handy too. In fact, you might want like some needle nose pliers as well. And I'm going to go ahead and get just a real thin layer of glue here. You don't want to overdo it. I don't want a lot of squeeze out here, but I do want to make sure that we've got a good glue joint between the soundboard and the bridge. I'm just going to take a cotton swab and make sure there aren't any voids or any areas that aren't covered with glue. Okay, now we're going to use the screws again with the washer. And the real trick here is just to find the hole and get the screw up through there. It can be kind of tricky sometimes. And then we have the first screw through, and I'm going to go ahead and put the bridge on top of that. And go ahead and start the clamp by getting that on there as well. Just be careful and don't let the bolt slide back through into the guitar body. I'm actually putting a little pressure here horizontally to hold that in place. There we go. So once you've got the nut on the end, it won't slide back through. Then the same thing on the other side. Get your screw started there, get it up through the clamp, and get a nut on there so it doesn't fall in. And now you can't really screw it from the inside of the guitar, but you can hold the end of the bolt, and here I'm using some needle nose pliers and just tightening down the nut and getting that really nice and snug. And do that with the other one as well. And then I'm going to put a little scrap piece of wood in between the bolt here and that last little edge of the bridge, and then screw that down so that you can get some pressure there on the very ends of the bridge. Same thing on the other side. And just kind of take that easy. I'm just putting a little piece of wood there so I don't make a dent in the wood of the bridge. It can be a little tricky getting it to tighten down with the curve that little end has on it. Then once you've got it tightened up, be sure and clean up your glue here. You don't want to leave anything there to hurt the finish. And that's where the cotton swabs come in. You want to do a really good job of cleaning every last little bit of glue off here. If it starts to tack up on you, a little wet rag would be just fine to get that up. Then let it dry for 24 hours. And then you can go ahead and drill the other holes for the bridge pins.